So, friends, welcome to this lecture on technology, society, and politics. Today's lecture is titled The Scientific Renaissance, or otherwise called Scientific Revolution. So, friends, a discussion on scientific revolution is significant to understand how technology evolved in the world and how technology is deeply implicated in our social life. Friends, it was in the year 1543, 1543, 1543, Nicolaus Copernicus was on his deathbed. And in his deathbed, he received the first published copy of his magnum opus, or rather his most famous book, titled De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium. And its English translation is like this: on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres. Friends, by then, already his contributions to astronomical studies seemed that he had worked as a successor to Ptolemy, not as a precursor of Johannes Kepler or Isaac Newton. That is the key to understanding Copernicus and his work should come as a recognition of the fact that we should consider him the last of the ancient astronomers than considering him the first of the modern astronomers. So he belongs to the antiquity. If we consider him as if he belongs to the antiquity, we can have a better understanding of his contributions, thereby what changes he brought about in the modern day understanding of the nature. And friends, he was at most an ambivalent revolutionary. It's very difficult to follow him. And historians of ideas tell us that Copernicus never intended to overthrow the old system of Greek astronomy. He never rejected that idea. He never rejected the astronomical wisdom of the ancient Hellenic Greece. But rather, Copernicus tried to restore its original purity. So he was trying to reinvent the lost purity of Hellenic astronomy. And he first proposed what may be called the famous heliocentrism. And he published this idea not in his De Revolutionibus. He published it as a anonymous secret manuscript, and it was titled Commentarilus. Commentarilus. That was the title of that secret manuscript. And friends, he didn't circulated it among all the people. Rather, he circulated it among an esoteric audience, that is, some professionals who are able to understand astronomy. And it took place in the year 1514, 1514. And he withdrawn that publication. And he was very much afraid of publishing De Revolutionibus, and we know that possibly because he felt that such a secrets should not be revealed during those days. He was really afraid of that, and when we look at the first page of that book, we can see that he dedicated that book to Roman Pope, because that point out the fact that he was very much afraid of the church. That's why he dedicated that book itself to Roman Pope. But friends, it was a younger German astronomer called Rheticus. Rheticus, he happened to see the written, manuscript of De Revolutionibus, and he took a note of that book with the title Narratio Prima, or otherwise called the first account. And he took that note in the year 1514 after he consulted Nicholas Copernicus and approved. He sought his permission for its publication. And it was Rheticus who was the man behind the publication of De Revolutionibus. And it appeared in the year 1543, just before his death. That's why I told you he received the first copy of his book on his deathbed. But friends, Copernicus took the first step towards the formation of what may be we today call the modern scientific worldview, the modern scientific worldview, otherwise called scientific revolution. And the most significant contribution, among other things, was the idea that he proposed a sun-centered worldview, a heliocentric cosmology. Friends, in the year 1543, most cultures in the world, let alone the Christian culture, the world over, men believed that Earth was at the center of the world. And particularly Christianity still believed, that is in the year 1543, still believed that Earth was at the center of the world, because that was the Ptolemaic astronomy or the Platonic astronomy. The Platonic astronomy and the Ptolemaic astronomy, which was recognized by the Roman papacy, believed that Earth was at the center of the world. So that is called the geocentric cosmology. Geocentric cosmology was popularized by Ptolemy, an ancient astronomer, an astronomer of the antiquity. And his proposition, friends, I mean Nicholas Copernicus' proposition, was going to have a profound social significance, because this far man wasn't allowed to inquire into celestial bodies, because we are all part of the nature. Christianity believes we are all part of the nature, and the nature is a grand design, and it is thought to be the design of the creator, the great creator. And all religions tell the same thing, friends. All religions tell the same thing. And the world is a great design, including man. We are also part of the nature. So man is not able to understand who they are. Why? Because the creator, the great designer, has never given us that ability. That's why it is very futile for man to inquire behind the secrets in nature. So it was a religious faith that there is a grand design behind everything, and this design towards which we are all part are not in a position to understand because we don't have that ability. So, friends, that's why the Copernican idea of a heliocentric world was a revolutionary idea, because before that, church recognized what Ptolemy said about the cosmology, that earth is the center of the world and every object that we are able to see through our naked eye are rotating the earth. And church endorsed that science. And church never believed that it is a science, it was something, a grand design. And his scientific, the Copernican scientific findings has broken so radically the geocentrism, the astronomical wisdom, and the biblical tradition then prevailing in the Christian Europe. It brought about profound changes in the social domain of the entire Europe, let alone Christianity. So, friends, ever since, with the publication of De Revolutionibus on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres, the full name of that book, when we look back in 2021, when we look back at our own history, at our own human history, friends, it is believed that the scientific revolution already started with the Copernican idea of heliocentrism, popularized through his book. So the scientific revolution, friends, of course, was a series of scientific events. It marked the emergence of modern science during the early modern period. Science was there in the antiquity. They call it natural philosophy. That is the philosophy about the nature, how things are, why they are. What does it mean to say nature? How we are part of it. So these are all secrets, grand secrets. And the philosophy about that grand secret for the ancient people, particularly the Hellenic world, it was natural philosophy. And friends, with the publication of Revolutionibus, we are believing that a scientific revolution has taken place and many discoveries, many events took place, from developments in mathematics, astronomy, physics, to biology, including human anatomy and chemistry. So many inventions and discoveries, new propositions, new abstract propositions. That was all following the year in which Nicolaus Copernicus published De Revolutionibus. So before these events which followed Copernicus, man generally believed that humans are not endowed with the skill, with the brain to reach the unknown, because the unknown are always the unknown. It's not fair to look into the unknown, because that is a grand design that the Christianity believes, that the Islam believes. There's a grand design. So human wisdom is not that talented, because Christianity, including Islam, most religions believe that there is a grand design, there's a grand designer, and if humans, suppose humans are all the creation of that grand design, and if humans go behind that grand design, humans are going to destroy that grand design itself. Then there is no point in religion, there is no point in God. So you are not allowed to go behind it. You are supposed to have unconditional faith in that grand design. But friends, All of a sudden, all these ideas were challenged by Copernicus. Copernicus proposed a new theory, and many events followed in areas such as wide as mathematics, astronomy, physics, biology, anatomy, and chemistry. But the new discoveries challenged many orthodox assumptions, and the new discoveries made a parallel with the ancient natural philosophy, in which the ancient scientific traditions tried to inquire into the secrets of nature. That is, the scientific renaissance made parallels with the ancient natural philosophy. The natural philosophy, for its own sake, inquired into the secrets in the nature. So, ancient natural philosophy and scientific discoveries are analogous because its intention are same, to understand grand designs, the nature of grand designs, the secrets in the nature. So scientific revolution has influenced the intellectual and social movement known as the Enlightenment in the 17th century. In European history, the term scientific revolution refers to the period between Copernicus and Newton. Of course, the chronological period is dramatically disputed, and some commentators argue that it is usually running between Nicolaus Copernicus and Isaac Newton. Some people fix it with the publication of Principia or the Optic of Newton, or some others claim that it is still with the death of Newton, whereas some others argue that it is specifically related to Enlightenment Newtonians. Some commentators argue that it is specifically related to Enlightenment Newtonians, and some commentators argue that Copernicus must be removed from scientific revolution because Copernican revolution was finished by Galileo and Kepler. So Copernicus may be removed from scientific revolutions. But friends, generally the assumption is that scientific revolution is an era between Copernicus De Revolutionibus and Newton's Principia. And all the major discoveries during this phase is called the scientific revolution. But certainly, friends, scientific revolution, no matter what it is, the chronology is not our point of concern. Analytically speaking, scientific revolution was initially, all of us, thought that it was an intellectual transformation of our own understanding about nature and its secrets. It's an intellectual climate in which we tried to understand the nature and its secrets. But friends, this is not simply related to nature and its secrets. It has profound social significance. When we define scientific revolution, we look at the antiquity. We always look at the antiquity and say that there was attempt in the antiquity, in the Hellenic world, to contemplate about nature. But friends, we should also reconsider the social significance of the discoveries during the modern scientific revolutions. In the antiquity, science was a personal pursuit of great men. Pythagoras, the atomist, the philosophers of change, or traditions in medicine. These were all pursued by great men. That's why in the antiquity, scientific understanding lacked practical application. But the scientific revolution in the modern world between Copernicus and Newton, between De Revolutionibus and Principia. It acquired, that is, scientific knowledge acquired practical application. That is, it acquired a utilitarian moment. It acquired a utilitarian moment. And 17th century is, of course, branded as an age of scientific revolution. It brought about drastic changes in the European approach to science, brought about drastic change in the European approach to science. It profoundly affected the social system, human life, and it placed, most importantly, scientific revolution placed man at the center of the world. Because before this, everything is so seemed because God designed it. That's why God was at the center of the world. But now, with the Copernican revolution, who said that sun is at the center of the world, the ability of man to understand the secret of the nature was exposed. So man was placed at the center of the world and God replaced. The word revolution, therefore, connotes a period of turmoil, a period of social upheaval, a period of social turmoil, a period of social upheaval. And friends, the ideas about the world changed severely, and a completely new era of thought is ushered in. So the term revolution, therefore, describes quite accurately what happened during the scientific revolution and what the scientific community contributed for the development of life in the planet. And friends, most importantly, with the scientific revolution, medieval scientific philosophy was abandoned. New methods were proposed to understand secrets in the nature. Look, man, we know that right from the antiquity, man always looked at the stars and inquired why it is so. Why the stars? What is in the sky? This inquiry, this curiosity, for which church had an explanation. Whether we are part of that sky, whether we are part of that cosmological system, whether we are different from that cosmological system. For this curiosity, church had an explanation, for which we know that St. Thomas Aquinas had contributed, St. Augustine had contributed, John Calvin had contributed, and they all depended the Aristotelian methods, syllogism, otherwise called syllogism. Aristotle used syllogism. That is, syllogism is a particular way of thinking. You may remember that all men are mortal. Aristotle is a man. Therefore, Aristotle is mortal. This sort of syllogism was proposed by Aristotle. This sort of argumentative tradition was proposed by Aristotle on his method, and it is called syllogism. And syllogism was used by St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas, John Calvin, and other theologians to validate the claims of the church that the world as it is seemed is a creation of the grand designer, the God. But friends, this syllogism was challenged. The Aristotelian syllogism, endorsed by Christian medieval theologians to create a dogmatic world, was first challenged in the 17th century. It was first done by Copernicus, then a series of scientific men, Francis Bacon, Galileo Galilei, René Descartes, a French philosopher, Sir Isaac Newton, a British philosopher, natural philosopher. So the importance of experimentation to understand nature was reaffirmed. The importance of God to science was invalidated. The importance of God to science was invalidated. And man is thought to have creative ability to understand secrets in the nature. And the pursuit of science itself gained validity of its own. Science was separated from religion. Science was separated from philosophy. And friends, you can see by 17th century a military revolution took place. The European geographical explorations took place. The discovery of new world, particularly the Americas, by Amerigo Vespucci. Amerigo Vespucci landed in the Americas. The new world has discovered, and scientific revolution unfolded. We already know that in the late 1430s, 1430s, Johannes Gutenberg already invented printing press of a movable type and spread this powerful technology throughout Europe. And the printing press altered, friends, the intellectual and cultural landscape of the entire modern Europe. He had apparently done it independently of printing technology, which are already prevalent in Asia, particularly Chinese, who had some kind of printing technology. But the European printing technology that Gutenberg invented was different from the Asians. And he produced around 13,000 works by 1500, by the year 1500. And friends, knowledge has been revolutionized, it has been democratized, it has been popularized, and the monopoly of learning has been destroyed. Because before this, knowledge was centered in certain universities or centers of learning. Since the antiquity, we know that the Lyceum, we know the Academy, we know the Alexandrian Museum, where the knowledge was, a monopoly of few great men. But now this monopoly has been destroyed by the printing press. And friends, now it is a turn of Bacon, Francis Bacon. So a Baconian momentum started in the 16th century. In the 16th century, a Baconian moment started. And Bacon, Francis Bacon, was an English philosopher, a statesman, a scientist, and so many other distinctions. A polymath, you can say a polymath. And Bacon has been called the creator of empiricism. And he rejected Aristotle. And he popularized inductive methodologies for scientific inquiry. So if you understand the secrets in the nature, you have to go behind an inductive method. And this inductive method is otherwise called the Baconian method or scientific method. And scientific method was created by Francis Bacon. He preferred inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is a method of deriving a general theory. Inductive method is a method of deriving general theory, what may be called a truth in the nature or secrets in the nature, from observation of certain similar facts and principles. So this was in a way different from the Aristotelian method, which was later endorsed by Christian theologians to propose an ecclesiastical worldview. An ecclesiastical worldview, otherwise called dogmatism, Christian dogmatism. So Aristotle used a deductive reasoning technique. That is a method of using general principles to explain specific instances where a particular phenomena is explained through its relation to the universal or the grand design. You might remember Thales of Miletus, who stated that there is flood in the Nile River because there is wind pattern. So wind pattern is a natural truth, and that natural truth, that's a grand design, affects a particular event, that is flood in the Nile River. And the flood in the Nile River is a particular pattern. That particular pattern is affected by a grand pattern or a grand design called wind in the nature. So wind in the nature is universal, but a particular pattern, flood in the Nile, is a particular thing that is fluctuating, and that is fluctuating depending upon the wind. So this sort of a grand design, and that grand design is used in order to explain a particular pattern. This device was proposed by Aristotle. This is called syllogism. And friends, Bacon rejected Aristotelian technique. And he, like Roger Bacon of the 13th century, there is another Bacon called Roger Bacon. This is Francis Bacon of the 17th century. There is another Bacon called Roger Bacon of the 13th century. Roger Bacon was also an empiricist. And Francis Bacon used the empirical method of Roger Bacon. And Bacon, that is Francis Bacon, emphasized the importance of fact gathering as the first step towards scientific method. So method is very important. Not speculation. Wisdom is not speculation. Rather, you have to find out facts, as many facts as possible. Based on facts, we have to understand truth in the nature. This is called the Baconian method. And he published the famous Novum Organum, his most famous book, that was written in Latin language and published in the year 1620. And this was a reaction towards Aristotle's one of the most famous book, Organon, Organon, Organon. That was Aristotelian treatises on syllogism, logic and syllogism, Syllogism. In Novum Organum, Bacon proposed that empirical understanding is the real understanding. And this is called the Baconian method. And friends, the modern world accepted the Baconian method of understanding truth, that facts are very important. That is, empirical truth is the real. Because we are all part of the nature, so what we are able to understand through our senses are the real. There is nothing beyond the sensory perceptions. Because the nature and us, there is a bridge between the nature and the man, because man is part of the nature and nature is part of the man. Therefore, to understand truth in the nature, we should use our own senses, because senses that we have are part of the design called the nature. That's called empirical method. And friends, then comes the Kepler's Johannes Kepler, a German astronomer, mathematician, and astrologer. And he redirected the course of scientific revolution. Kepler concluded Copernican heliocentric proposition and underlined that planets orbit the sun not in circles but in ellipses. So that was a grand proposition which created waves across Europe, particularly the Christian Europe. And he challenged a major premise of astronomy that has taken place 2000 years ago. from Plato on, or otherwise Plato onwards. And he wrote a famous book, his magnum opus, Astronomia Nova, Astronomia Nova, where he proposed the three laws of planetary motion, the three laws of planetary motion. And in 1619, Kepler again published Harmonies Mundi, or the harmonies of the world. Friends, through this book, Kepler argued that the sun possessed an anima motrix, that is a moving soul or spirit. Sun possessed a spirit. And he referred this to a Holy Ghost. And that Holy Ghost propelled the entire planets. So this was all radical propositions, friends. These sort of propositions were unknown to the medieval Christian mind. But Kepler was rejected by many of his scientific contemporaries, and he was said to be an eccentric mystic. Kepler was said to be an eccentric mystic among his own contemporaries, but he enjoyed a reputation as a great astronomer. But he was said to be an great astronomer gone slightly mad, because he was saying that there is an anima motrix in sun, which propel all the planets in the world. Friends, then it was the turn of Galileo Galilei, an Italian astronomer, physicist, and engineer. He was the pivotal figure in the entire scientific revolution of the modern science. Friends, it was a Dutchman named Hans Lippershey. Galileo came to know that the Dutchman Hans Lippershey invented telescope in Holland in 1608. And Galileo heard report of the toy. Those days it was called a toy. That telescope invented by Hans Lippershey was said to be a toy. And Galileo heard about that toy, and he tried to build something like that, invent something like that, create something like that. And he created something, like that toy using Venetian glass, and he started observing planetary movements into the sky. And he found something very interesting, friends. These were unknown to man, which challenged the entire Christian worldview. And he rushed into the Prince in 1610 and published a 40-page pamphlet. It was called Sidereus Nuncius, otherwise called the Starry Messenger. And he dedicated this book to the Grand Duke of Tuscany, Cosimo II di Medici. His name was Cosimo II di Medici. Cosimo II di Medici, the Grand Duke of Tuscany. In his Starry Messenger, Galileo announced the existence of myriads of new stars in the sky, never before seen by anyone in the world. And he said that is the Milky Way. That was proposed by Galileo in his Starry Messenger. Friends, that rocked across the Christian mind of the Europe. So the ability of man to understand secrets in the nature was exposed by Galileo. And Galileo revealed there are 4 moons circling around Jupiter. There are 4 moons circling around Jupiter. And friends, later he published another book, 2 New Sciences, otherwise called Discorsi. discourse, otherwise called discourse, or two new sciences, where he used mathematical analysis to understand planetary movements. Friends, then comes the turn of René Descartes. So we have seen Copernican turn, we have seen the Bacon turn, we have seen the Kepler turn, now the Galileo turn, now the Cartesian turn. René Descartes was a French philosopher, mathematician, and scientist who invented analytical geometry. Before that, friends, geometry and algebra were different. Friends, these are all, things we use not in everyday life, but in understanding, what is the secrets in the nature. Geometry and algebra. So he published the Discourse on the Method in French language in 1637. And Descartes disagreed with Galileo and Bacon, because Galileo and Bacon proposed experimental method, that otherwise called empiricism. And Descartes disagreed with, Galileo and Bacon. That's why his famous proposition, I think, therefore I am. That is, Galileo and Bacon said, what is in us are already there in the nature. What is in us are already there in the nature. So our route to understand what is in the nature is our own perception of that nature. Clear? That's called empirical method. But that method was challenged by Descartes, because that's why Descartes said, what is the proof that I am a living being? Can I know I am living from the outside, or can I know I am living from the inside? And he was saying that I think therefore I am means that it's my own perception, my own very being is the proof that I am here. It's a little bit abstract ideas. We don't have that much time to go behind all these heavy loaded ideas, but think that I think therefore I am was a proposition, a landmark proposition that challenged Galileo and Bacon. The crux of this idea is that accept nothing as true that is not self-evident. You should not accept anything if that is not self-evident. Second, divide problems into their simplest parts. Divide the problems into their simplest parts. That's why, that's called reductionism. That's why molecules in chemistry, atoms in physics, compounds, cells, or particles. This way you reduce things in the nature to understand its structure. That's called, Cartesian paradigm. That's a Cartesian paradigm. Cartesian deduction. Third, solve problems by proceeding from simple to complex. That is molecules, particles, compounds. From this, you can move towards the grand complex things. So you have to divide things into small things. And from the small things, you can move on to the big things. And recheck whatever you have discovered through reasoning. Recheck whatever you have discovered through rechecking. So friends, the Cartesian paradigm was proposed. And then comes the turn of Isaac Newton. And with this Isaac Newton, scientific revolution is ended. Isaac Newton was an English mathematician, physicist, astronomer, theologian. He was also a theologian, not only an astrologer. He was a Christian. And he was considered to be the greatest mathematician and most influential scientist of all the time. Isaac Newton. He changed the entire intellectual landscape of late 17th and early 18th century. Newton's philosophy Naturalis Principia Mathematica, or otherwise called Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy, published in 1687. Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy was published in the year 1687. That was basically a theoretical inquiry into cosmology and underlying physics of the world. And he was trying into the nature through the discoveries of Descartes, Galileo, Kepler, Copernicus, and going back to Aristotle. So he took a grand enterprise. Newton first published on optics. And he published something about rays. Then he went on to study gravity, forces. Principia appeared in the year 1687. And Principia is a highly mathematical text in which he defines many of his scientific terms, particularly his 3 laws of motion. You might have studied in school days the 3 laws of motion proposed by Isaac Newton in his Principia. And Principia consists of 3 books. And when he was elected the president of the Royal Society was a famous scientific club, he published Optic. Optic is as much famous as Principia. Both are, commendable works. And friends, with the publication of Principia and Optic, we can say that scientific revolution ended. And a new intellectual climate was born. Of course, science and technology and scientific revolution are closely connected. Here, with the publication of Optic and Principia, we can understand that science and technology and scientific revolution are closely connected, which is going to influence the next century, the coming century, that is the 18th century, where industrial revolution took place. Then a 4th industrial revolution is going to take place after this. That all was conditioned by the scientific revolution from Copernicus to Isaac Newton. A new intellectual climate was born, friends. It strengthened science. Science was used for application. So 17th century witnessed the rise and spread of experimental science. So many techniques were used. So many methodical sophistication took place. Thereby, scientists started looking at nature in a dramatic way, in a profound manner. We have discovered new methods of looking at nature. So it got so many, social significance. The scientific revolution got so many social significance. First of all, scientific revolution was a complex social and intellectual affair. It was a complex social and intellectual affair. Society has been reformed by the new ideas of the scientific revolution. Today we learn more about global warming or outer space or artificial intelligence. Why we are able to learn more about all these things, friends? Why we are able to live better? Why we are able to understand nature, the world today in a better way? Because our understanding of today is shaped by what we have learned through modern scientific revolution, from Copernicus to Isaac Newton. By breaking the hold of Aristotelian system, scientific revolution opened the door to modern science. much of the works of the late 16th and 17th century is still considered, friends. All these discoveries from Copernicus to Isaac Newton are still considered the foundation of major fields of modern science. These are all founding sciences. These people laid the foundation of founding sciences upon which what we call modern engineering, modern technology, modern medicine, everything is built upon. The founding assumptions are given by these people, including physics, modern physics, chemistry, biology, astronomy, everything. Its foundation goes to the period between Copernicus and Isaac Newton. So, friends, you can see that, you know, today, whatever inventions we have, we can attribute its root to these people. So, the scientific revolution has given the world a more logical description of physics, a more logical description of physics. And not only that, enlightenment was born out of scientific revolution. Enlightenment was born out of scientific revolution. Scientific revolution influenced the development of enlightenment values of individualism, that man can understand his own nature. So that is a grand proposition, friends. Before that, church said that man never understand man himself because he don't have that capability. The designer never has given him that capability. But scientific revolution told man that man has power. That's why, friends, individualism was born. The liberal notion of individualism was born because man got a human capacity called reason. He got capacity called reason. So the ability of scientists to understand what is in the sky is an example of our ability to understand secrets in the nature. So man got ability to understand, to discern truth in the nature through reason. So this idea created enlightenment. Friends, this created enlightenment of the 17th century. So, of course, the world has progressed from pre-modern to Aristotelian scientific practices to a more developed and advanced modern science of today. It is only because there was a scientific revolution from Copernicus to Newton. So, next day we will talk about the Industrial Revolution and technology. Friends, the lecture is ended. You can have a discussion.